If they're talking about this in an earnings call, if they're talking about this on a podcast interview, it's probably really important. It's probably making the algorithm go round. Learning from actually hands-on experience is so much more valuable than reading a textbook or getting an A on a multiple choice test. My customer would really enjoy a breakdown on X, so I'm going to spend the time, effort, money, and resources to do a breakdown on X. Again, I think a lot of brands want to have the 5 meetings and the 100-page strategy playbook before they launch the campaign or hop on a moment. By that time, it's too late. It's really that relationship bank account. How many deposits are you making and how many withdrawals are you making? What is going on, and welcome on inside yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every show, we talk to the experts. We break down the ever-changing social digital marketing landscape. This show is no different. We actually wanted to do, we haven't done this in a while, a Q&A episode. We get a lot of questions on social media, YouTube, via email from listeners, and we wanted to take a second and just break down, because I think as we looked at the questions, I think it could provide a ton of value to the audience. I also wanted to introduce to the audience our amazing new producer, at least new in terms of the audience getting to know her. Kayla Simmons, what's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me.
If you're on YouTube, you could see Kayla on the screen. And if you're listening, you obviously just heard her lovely voice. But Kayla, I know we kind of, rounded up some of the comments and emails that we've gotten over the last few weeks. And we wanted to dive in and answer, the good folks' questions. So let's dive in.
Yeah, we got some good ones. So just diving right in, we've got @_Lupo on Instagram. He wants to know, David, what are some of the tools and strategies that you've learned this year to keep up with the marketing landscape?
Lupo Anthony, what's going on? Thanks for listening. Thanks for the question. So a couple things. One, for me in particular, especially being the CEO of a social first marketing agency, I would say being a practitioner of your craft. I really think you have to be inside these platforms, messing with some of the features. At the very least, if you don't have time to do that or you don't feel like you're good enough to do that, at least on social, having teammates that can tell you what's going on with the algorithm, that can tell you what features seem to be working and keeping your thumb on the pulse. Another thing here too is if you set up Google Alerts or simply look for these things, we've shared videos, Kayla, on the CEO of Instagram telling us that DMs are much more important, right, than in feed or stories. So by simply listening to the Zuckerbergs and the Adam Rossi's and even Elon Musk to a certain extent, can really make sure, okay, if they're talking about this in an earnings call, if they're talking about this on a podcast interview, it's probably really important. It's probably making the algorithm go round. So that's one thing. And then two, I would say, and Kayla, you and I subscribe to a lot of these, right? Like the Ad Week, the Ad Ages, the Mashables, the different media, publications, to really make sure that we're keeping track of what's happening in the tech and the streaming space as well. Because again, as you see these different things, as far as whether it's layoffs, whether it's mergers and acquisitions, a lot of these things you'll see start to affect what content's coming out, what strategy is being levied out as well. So for me, I would say from a pure social practitioner standpoint, talking to my team, looking at the data and being inside those platforms. And from an industry standpoint, just making sure you're reading those articles, those earning recall recaps and deriving things from those as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that also kind of answers the piggyback question about how do you stay up to date on the trends. It's just staying in the know. You only know what you know. So
following the right people. And I think a lot of people don't. I did this during COVID, and maybe Kayla, you did as well. There was so much doom and gloom that I cleaned out my feed and started following puppies and things that made me happy.
Reset.
And I think with a lot of us marketers, who are you following? Can you do a simple Google search? Who are the top 20 marketers that I should be following? I get a lot of value from Professor Galloway, Scott Galloway, and Seth Godin. They really understand the marketing landscape. HBR as well has a lot of amazing stats. So anyways, going back to that, I really do think do a little bit of a purge of your Instagram, of your Twitter feed, of who you follow on LinkedIn as well. And I think you'd be amazed some of the gold that you come across once you take an hour and just search for, people that I should follow and get value from.
Gotta love it. Okay, let's keep it moving with Matt from Instagram. So he wants to know, when hiring, what is the best route to take? Would you go for someone with a crazy, insane portfolio, but they may be unknown or a freelancer, or someone who comes from like a top pedigree place, but their like portfolio is kind of like in like subpar? What's
Yeah,
your take?
going back to my being a practitioner. Now, when it comes to like design, let's say, back in the day, we would look at portfolio A versus portfolio B, and portfolio A is way better than portfolio B. But portfolio A is an 18-year-old that taught himself on YouTube how to do design. Portfolio B is someone that got a master's at a design school that works for a Fortune 500 company. We would hire portfolio A, the 18-year-old, every time because like it's really what is your output. And number two, when we're looking for social media managers, if somebody has their own social side hustle, and this is for you too, Kayla. The reason why Kayla was hired as a podcast producer and social media manager, she had her own podcast, right? And I can go to her YouTube and see that she knows the ins and outs. She's done some of the work on her own to really learn how to help us do our job. And you're not starting from scratch, right? So
Right.
I always go with the practitioner. I always respect the people that are actually doing it because I know learning from actually hands-on experience is so much more valuable than reading a textbook or getting an A on a multiple choice test. So for me, I mean, I've had success hiring the portfolio, hiring the practitioner versus hiring for the resume or hiring for the logo that they just came from.
That makes sense. I always say that the best professors I had in college were the ones who had real world experience and didn't go straight to
Yeah,
teaching.
100%. There's a lot of marketing and social media professors that never once have posted anything on Instagram or never once worked in a marketing organization. So it's difficult. You can't read about marketing. You kind of have to do it.
Exactly. Okay. Love that response. So let's move on to Chelsea from LA.
Chelsea.
She wants to ask, what is the most underused social platform
This is
in
very
your
easy for
opinion?
me. YouTube, and then YouTube again. You're talking about what? The second or third most visited website in the entire world, the planet. And so many brands do not have a YouTube strategy. They forget about it. They want to, I get it, Instagram, TikTok. They want to do different things across, even when Threads came out, they want to hop on that, but they don't have a YouTube short strategy. They don't have I think, Kayla, the reason why that is people, a lot of CMOs think of YouTube as the long form 10-minute high quality content platform. But
Mhm.
especially now that YouTube Shorts is there, which is so similar to a Reels or a TikTok, man, I mean, we're seeing so much success with some of our clients, even with our internal stuff, of getting so much reach just by utilizing YouTube Shorts in and in itself, let alone posting some of those longer form pieces. So, yeah, YouTube is the easy answer here and needs to be considered a social platform. And I think a lot of brands forget about it.
I have to agree. Okay, moving right along to Justin from Atlanta. And I feel like you kind of started speaking to this with the first question, but what are some of the best platform strategies you recommend to get the biggest return on investment?
Yeah, this is, I guess, somewhat of a boring answer, but it's really looking at the data, understanding what your audience enjoys and likes. And I think we do this daily, Kayla, as well, right? Like, so our podcast listeners really like this episode, but on YouTube they like this episode better.
Right.
So I just don't think enough people look at the analytics and data and derive themes. Now, some of those hypotheses turn out not to be true. You think they like the content because it was shorter than longer. You think you like it because it was faster paced than longer paced, whatever it may be. But the more you kind of hypothesize and test it, it's a scientific experiment. You start to get just much more. You start hitting the bullseye a lot more often by simply looking at the data. So across all platform strategies, two things: look at the data, start pulling away the bottom 10% and adding more to the top 10% and seeing how that does for you. And number two, when these platforms release new features, like when YouTube released YouTube Shorts, when Instagram released Reels, when Instagram released collabs, jump on those platforms immediately because that platform is juicing that algorithm. They're never going to admit it, but they want those features to succeed. So they're seeding that out to more people early. So the faster you can jump on those new features when you're already established on a platform, the better.
I agree. So moving on to Jamie from Chicago, she wants to know, how can you leverage social to start positioning yourself as a valid thought leader in your industry? You know a lot about this, David.
Yeah, I would just say that focus on value and not the checkout or the call to action. I think you really have to spend a lot of time on my customer would really enjoy a breakdown on X. So I'm going to spend the time, effort, money, and resources to do a breakdown on X. And when I say X, I don't mean Elon Musk and Twitter. I mean, whatever that topic may be. So just really get understanding. For me, for my audience, let's say I know there's a lot of CMOs, a lot of social marketers, a lot of people in the sports and entertainment space and tech, streaming. So anytime there's news, whether it's the actors strike, like what does that mean for the business? Whether it's a new feature like Threads, should we hop on it? Should we wait? What's your opinion? Find out what you're an expert in, where you can provide value, what your audience wants to hear, and then go from there. But don't try to be a copycat. And just because somebody else succeeds really well in a certain vertical, don't copy that. Just focus on your end consumer and what they're going to find value from.
So, Bet from New York City, shout out, whoop, whoop, I live in New York City.
Love it.
He wants to know, how do you grow your followers on social media?
Were you just walking the streets in New York and asking people if they had any questions on social or marketing? I like it. It's great work,
it
Kayla.
wouldn't be the first time.
How do you grow your followers on social media? Two things come to mind immediately. Number one, a little bit more boring, but it's true. You have to look at the data. What content? Go back. You can look at this. You can literally go on the Instagram. You can sort your content by most followed piece of content, and you can derive strategies like, wow, my top 10 pieces of content were this theme, and this is where I got 11 followers on this piece of content, 3 followers on this piece of content, where maybe the other thing I'm talking about got 0, 0, 0, and 0. So you can really see based on content type, not only from a like video versus static, but also like whatever the theme is, you can find out what they're following by and put more gasoline on that fire by creating more content that seems to be getting those followers. Number two, I would say it's a lot more harder on these established platforms. Instagram, Meta, they've been around, right, for well over a decade, 15 years. So to organically build an audience from scratch, it's a lot more difficult because they want you to pay to play. They want you to use their ad platforms to boost your posts. They don't really want to just give all this free value to you right out the gate. So if you want to talk about followers in particular, jumping on new platforms early is super important. That way there's less competition there. But what I also will say in this game of TikTok has changed it, and I think Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts has followed suit. It's not about how many followers you have. It's about the discoverability. So when you're creating content, 99% of the people that are going to see your content on TikTok are people that don't follow you or know who the heck you are. So every piece of content, you kind of have to reestablish that credibility. You have to bring them in with that hook so they know that this is worth watching. That's important to know because I think a lot of people want to get all these followers on TikTok and then they get 200 views. Or, they have 1 million followers on TikTok, but they get 5,000 views. It's because TikTok is seeding that out to people outside your followers. And then if enough people like it, they may bring more of your followers in the fold, but it's not like the old Instagram of the world where they automatically would seed it to 3 to 5% of your audience. They're seeding it actually outside of your audience, which is just a different ballgame we're playing.
That's so true. And Amy from Miami, she has the perfect piggyback question off of this. How do you get those followers to engage with your posts?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes, and you've seen this on YouTube for the past 15 years as well, ask. Not so much like, but if you see YouTube, even like Mr. Beast of the world, hit that subscribe button, double tap that screen, hit us up in the DMs, ask questions. I have a comment for you. Who do you guys think are going to win tomorrow or today or whatever it may be? You'd be amazed how just by asking and that call to action, if you will, derives a lot of response. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're talking about engagement specifically. But I really do think if you can figure out what content your audience engages with, and engaging meaning they really love and enjoy, and you focus on creating more and more of that content, you're gonna hit more home runs than strikeouts just by looking at what they're liking, what they're enjoying, and focusing your content strategy based on that.
You always got to have the sports analogy. Gotta love David. Man, okay. So Jade from San Diego, and I feel like you kind of answered this with Justin's question earlier. How soon should brands hop on new social media trends?
And you're talking more like from a pop culture reference standpoint?
Yeah. So I guess like when they roll out these new features or when they, like, for instance.
Yeah, from a feature standpoint, I just like to test relatively quickly. And this goes for actually like pop culture viral moments and also new features. You don't have to create a deck, a strategy. You don't have to create a 20-hour piece of content. Just try that lo-fi, that UGC, that whatever it may be, to start testing around in that environment. So I said this for Threads. I said, everybody slow down. We don't know. I know they got 100 million users, but also they were able to piggyback off the Instagram audience. Let's wait and see. However, play with it. Start a channel or start a handle, post a few things, see if your audience is enjoying it. And then as this thing picks up steam potentially over the months and years, you'll have a head start on it. But, we saw with Threads that, pretty much 80 to 90% of that audience never came back after the first few weeks. So would it have made sense to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and move all your resources to Threads? The answer is no. So I like, again, I think a lot of brands want to have the 5 meetings and the 100-page strategy playbook before they launch the campaign or hop on a moment. By that time, it's too late. So I would say get in there, play in the sandbox a little bit, find themes, find data points, readjust, evolve strategy, things like that.
That makes so much sense.
Yep.
And to that note, how can you tell if a social media trend is viable?
So from a trending standpoint, I think a lot of brands make mistakes that they hop on a trend, they hop on a viral pop culture moment that's not authentic to their audience, and they kind of wake up with egg on their face, if you will, because it's just, people know that you're hopping on it just to get reach or get followers, and it's inauthentic. But when it makes perfect sense for you to talk about that trend, I think your audience really appreciates it and thinks that it's very clever and funny and engaging. So that's from like a trending standpoint. When we're talking about social trends, I think an example of this is like how memes just took over the internet a few years ago across social media. Listen, you're going to start to see other brands try it. You can look at their engagement, look at your competitors. You can obviously try it on your platforms as well. And again, it's really about just looking at what's working, what's not working. But, for a while there was a lot of video memes where they had like the name of the person kind of following like the character on TV or what have you. And that was kind of picking up steam. That kind of fell off, but memes still work, but not as good as they did 2 years ago on Instagram. So I think it's just about looking at what other people are trying, seeing the engagement they're getting, trying yourself. And then, again, I'm born with this, but just look at the data, trust the data, and keep on evolving from that, what that data is telling you.
If you take away nothing else,
Yeah, exactly.
look at the data.
Yeah.
Look at the data.
Yep.
All right. And then Josh from Austin is bringing it on home with the last question, which is a very common question. What is the number one mistake that brands and thought leaders can make on social media that you've seen?
Yeah, I had a great conversation on my podcast, or on the podcast. You guys remember if you listened, Jeff Finster, CEO of Everbull. He said when he had that agency with Neil Patel, he had a credence, if you will, 8 for them, 2 for us. And the number one mistake I think brands and thought leaders and people make is they're constantly asking and pulling from their audience. And I like what he said here too. It's really that relationship bank account. How many deposits are you making and how many withdrawals are you making? And in a friend situation, if you're a friend of mine, Kayla, and you're constantly asking me to take you to the airport every 2 days, I don't want to be your friend anymore. I don't see any more value in this relationship. But if you take me out to lunch 4 times, you check in on me when my grandmother is sick, and we have this like very authentic relationship, and then you ask me to take you to the airport, it's like, of course, like you've made so many deposits in our friendship, you have more than enough relationship equity to take that withdrawal. And I think we don't look at the audience or our consumers intimately enough to be like, this is a really strong connection that we have to build, invest in, and really value. And they just look at people as a number or a dollar sign. And that's where you get the buy my course, or just like continuing to ask the call to action. And nobody wants to be sold to. But if you give someone enough value, you can ask for a favor. And that's what it's about as a brand on social media. Give a ton of value, engage your audience, be the one-stop shop, be the aggregator. And then every once in a while, you can ask for someone.
Oh, chef's kiss.
There you
Gotta
have
love it. These were some great questions.
Yeah, Q&A. Thanks so much. So everybody, feel free to always comment. We'll be on the lookout. Instagram, YouTube, also on Instagram stories. Every like month or so, we'll kind of elicit that. And you can hit us up over on email too. But really appreciate all the questions. Keep them coming. Thank you so much to Kayla. I'm glad we got the official introduction. New York City's in the building. as we record this here in San Diego. So there it is, the Q&A episode here on the Business Social. Hope you guys found a lot of value out of that one. We'll do more of these in the coming weeks and months. So this has all been powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. This has been yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast.